What's good, people? This is Chris Crazyhouse here, and I wanted to do a video talking about the sad news, at least in my view, of the breakup and the retiring of the techno dance group Daft Punk. They decided that they will be calling it quits and breaking up and not doing any more Daft Punk albums. And I was very upset by this, and I want to talk about it because I have just some very personal memories I want to share about the group and their music. So before I get started, just let me say, as always, if you want to support this channel, I have an online store that you can go check out. I sell my coloring books on there, Naturally Cute, as well as the Chris Crazyhouse Hyper Fun coloring book. I also sell Naturally Cute stickers. I also sell my comic books. That's everything from Knuckleheads to the Chris Crazyhouse Action Magazine to the Chronicles of PA fantasy comic books, as well as the Chronicles of PA graphic novel. And I also have a number of art prints and posters that you can purchase on my online store. So if you're so inclined, you can go there. The links will be in the description box as well as the comment section. Also, if you want to support this channel, this is very new. I have a Patreon that you can go there and support me there. And it's $5 a month. And in return for being a Patreon, you will get exclusive coloring book pages to download on Patreon, as well as digital art that you can download that you can put either on the background screen of your computer or the background screen of your phone. So that's what we got so far on the Chris Crazyhouse official Patreon. Like I said, if you want to support me there, please feel free, and the links will also be in the description as well as the comment section. So on to the breakup of Daft Punk. So I got this news earlier in the week, and I saw the initial story, and I said, "Damn, that's a shame that they're breaking up." You know, a lot of people don't know Daft Punk is actually just a duo. It's just two guys that were their school buddies who had a very big love of music, period. But mostly they got into doing like rave music and techno, and they just enjoyed the energy of that so much that they want to make that type of music. And I think originally they actually had an actual rock band, and one of the reviews of that rock band was it was Dafty Punk Nonsense or something like that. So that's why they took that name and took that negative review and made that their actual name when they decided to get into doing more techno electronic dance music. So, you know, my experiences with their music has been very profound. It's something that has inspired me through most of my adult and my creative career. So anything having to do with artwork, their music has always kind of been there. And so when I got the news, I was really bummed out about it. And the more I saw people posting on social media, whether it be on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and saying how bad they feel about it, it started making me feel even worse. And I was wondering why is it downing me so much? And I realized that their music coincides with some of the happiest memories of my life. So that's why I think it hurt me so bad, because anytime I hear their music, it takes me right back to those extremely happy moments. And I was going to talk about some of those moments now in this video, just to kind of give you an idea of why I take this so seriously. I mean, it feels like it's been just a bad year. Like 2020 seemed like a bad year for music anyway, and 2021 doesn't seem to be shaping up any better. And what I mean by that is a lot of hip-hop legends have been passing away recently in like 2020 and 2021. So it was bad with that, and then now getting into dance music, which is something that I'm also a big fan of, that Daft Punk is deciding to break up. And they say it's not like they have any animosity towards each other. They just want to move on and do other things, which I, as creatively as an artist, I do understand. but it still feels bad to hear that. So going back to when I first heard Daft Punk, I know they came out with an album back in '97. I think that was the Homework album. And I wasn't really into them then. I was still in high school. I didn't get into them until I got into college, which was like the next year in 1998. So the song that I heard from their first album that I liked was the Around the World song. And I didn't know anything about Daft Punk then. I didn't know who they were or their music. I just knew I liked that particular song. So that was kind of like my introduction to Daft Punk. And I couldn't say I was honestly a fan of the group. I later became a fan of that album. I went back and listened to it later when I became a true fan. And when I became a true fan was right around the time that Discovery came out. And anyone remembers when that album was released, obviously what got me into it was when they made that animated film to coincide with that album. So originally the tracks for Discovery were coming out and they had that animation attached to it. And of course everyone remembers the first song, One More Time. So that's what it was attached to, and that's what got my attention. I remember obviously being in school for animation and then seeing that on the screen. Obviously that's going to lock me in and make me watch it. So in watching that, I really enjoyed the visuals because it was done in a very retro style of animation. It harkened back to, if anyone remembers, like Star Blazers or any of those sci-fi animes that came on in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm very much into retro sci-fi anyway, so it got my attention just with that. So I thought it was just a music video. I didn't realize there was a whole movie to it until a little bit later. And then once I found the actual film, I started watching the clips of it. And, finally it clicked to me. I was like, man, this music in this is great. And this is kind of like what I was doing already as an animator and as a filmmaker anyway. Was I was doing animated pieces with just music. There was no dialogue in my work, and their work had the same thing going on. So from then on, that got me into the actual music. And I'll be honest, that copy of Discovery, the first copy of Discovery that I had was a bootleg. I got it from a buddy of mine who was burning CDs off like Napster and stuff like that back then. So that my first copy was a bootleg, I will admit that. But I eventually did go back and buy the actual album. So don't think I was just pirating their stuff. But that got me into listening to it, and I would listen to it while I was working. I remember specifically listening to it while working on my demo, and then like later on towards my first job when I graduated from school. So between those years, I was just listening to that album over and over again. There's great background music, and their music to me was kind of like, it was like the music that was already going on in my head when I write or when I create something and I kind of see the adventures of my characters in my head. That's what their music sort of sounded like. And I've always appreciated groups that can actually find that medium where it's music that's actually going on in my head. There's only a very few groups that I can say do that. And, that's individual for everybody. Obviously, everyone doesn't have the same type of musical ideas in their head when they do their artwork. But Daft Punk fit perfectly with the stuff that was going on in my head. So, of course, I was really, really digging their music at that time. And then later on, I was living on my own on South Beach. And that's when the Human After All album came out. And I know a lot of people don't like, or not, I want to say they don't like it. This is not, out of Daft Punk's catalog, a lot of people say this is not their favorite. I enjoyed it because it had a very retro, almost like 80s new wave type feel to it. That's what I liked about it. Obviously, I was a kid during the 80s, but I can appreciate, I like that type of music anyhow. So it fit very well with just the vibe I was living back then. I was living a very artsy, almost somewhat bohemian lifestyle, living on South Beach, going to clubs, going to parties, hanging out in bars, listening to different types of music, working with different types of people in both TV, web animation, and independent film. So it fit my lifestyle perfectly back then. And anytime I hear any tracks from that album, it takes me right back to that time in my life. Very fun time. Chris Crazyhouse independent animations and website was in full swing at that time. I was putting out my own work as well as working on web animations for a TV company. So I was just having a ball back then, and that brings back very happy memories. So the next group, or the next Daft Punk album that came at a very important time in my life, was their live album, Alive, which came out in like 2007. So this was right around the time me and my wife were engaged, and then we got married. So that album means a lot to me, just from it was, I remember listening to it right after we got married, and we came back home after the honeymoon. I bought that album, and I'll be listening to the live version of Daft Punk. And that's when my wife discovered how big of a fan I was, and she realized how much I liked this, so she started buying me some of their stuff as well. Some of their like merchandise, and obviously the Interstellar, the animated movie. She bought the whole movie for me on DVD. So that became just that whole, like, those 2 years, 2007, 2008, very happy time in my life. Your first year of marriage is always usually the best. Obviously, my years are still going pretty good because we're still married, but I still remember that time very well, and it always gives me happy feelings. And we're still living in Miami, so every time I listen to that live album, it just takes me right back to then. So a very happy time in my life. The next thing I remember of Daft Punk was when first it was announced that they were doing the soundtrack to the sequel of the movie Tron, and I was all over that. As soon as I heard that, I was like, that is perfect. That is perfect. That universe and that type of content with their music, that digital electronic music, that fits perfectly. And the fact that Tron has a retro feel going all the way back to the 80s when the original Tron came out, and they almost do that kind of synth, new wave electronic music, I was like, that's perfect. So obviously when that came out, I was all over that easily, quickly. And I listened to it the day it came out. I went to the movies to see it. This was also a gift for my wife. This is one of the few times she paid for the movie because she knew how much I liked Daft Punk and how I was into Tron. So she paid for the movie almost like as a gift. And we went to the movies to see that, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. The soundtrack was perfect. Once again, that music is kind of like the music I would see when I created adventures in my head, and seeing it play out on screen in a visual medium. Like, you could almost, some of those scenes, you could almost just have no dialogue at all. Just watch the visuals and listen to the music. It was perfect. It was right up my alley. Like I said, I have been creating animations that were very similar. And at that time, I was working doing animated music videos, children's books, and a few like children's learning type things. So that's what I was doing in my career at that time. But it all fit. And once again, when I listen to that soundtrack, that's where it takes me back to. I can listen to that soundtrack and I'm back in my apartment in Atlanta. Because at the time, my wife, she was in the PhD program at Emory University, and I was working in Atlanta at the time. So it takes me right back to there. I can still see everything. I remember listening to it, taking the MARTA train. For those of you who live in Atlanta or know about the MARTA, taking the MARTA subway and then getting onto the bus or whatever and going home. Takes me right back there listening to that Tron Legacy soundtrack. And I know a lot of people love, even when the movie didn't do as well, people still love that soundtrack and almost consider it just as much a part of Daft Punk's discography as any other album that they came out with. So the last album they came out with, Random Access Memory, that came out when my wife and I, when we moved to Tennessee, and I was working in games at the time, social games. So it was like that. It came out at a time, I think came out like the springtime, but I remember listening to it over the summer. And that gives me great memories of that first summer of us here in Tennessee when we would drive over to Nashville or drive over to Memphis and just try out the different types of food, go on the different type of streets, go to the bars, go to some of the, the dance clubs, go to the theater and stuff like that. Check out the different libraries and museums they have here in Tennessee. We had a ball that summer. And that was finally when she was done with her doctorate program. She got her degree and she finally started working. So it wasn't just me working anymore. And just very happy memories I remember of us being in Tennessee for the first time. And that album was kind of like the soundtrack of that. So even after all their official albums, there was, they had done some collaborations with like The Weeknd. I enjoyed those two songs. Was it Starboy and I Can Feel It Coming? So I enjoyed both of those as well. Those take me back to when I was working at a warehouse overnight. That's when I was trying to get as much money as possible so I could buy a house. So I remember listening to that overnight, working third shift at the warehouse. So that's another good memory for me anyway. So that's what it was, man. Like Daft Punk has been there through all the great points in my life, and I really enjoyed their music. I got my daughter into listening to them. She calls anytime she hears the music, she's like, "Oh, that's the music from the Blue Aliens movie, Daddy." Yeah, it's because she's seen their movie Interstellar 5555. So that's what she thinks of when she hears their music or she hears me listening to it, and she enjoys it just as much. So that's what I mean, guys. Their music has meant a lot to me. You can see how I cataloged it in my mind and how I can go through each album and tell you the great points in my life where their songs came out or an album came out and I really enjoyed it. So that's why I figured out why I was so sad when I heard that they were breaking up, because their work was like a big part of my life. And I'm sure anyone else who was either a fan of them or just a fan of any artist out there. So when an artist passes away or a group breaks up or they decide that they're doing their last album or their last tour, you know how you feel when the end is there. But at least they left a body of work that you can still go back to and enjoy. Like I said, that music is a great soundtrack for me to where I can just go put it on or put on any of their albums and it takes me back to that time, but also helps me get those creative juices flowing for me when I do my own work. Like it'd be nice, and I doubt this will ever happen now, obviously, if they did like a soundtrack to a Chris Crazyhouse animated movie. I would enjoy that very much. It's probably not going to happen at this point. Who knows what the future may hold, but I doubt it. But at least I have their albums to listen to give me that creative push, and I can see the adventures in my head when I listen to their music. So that's what it is for me, folks. And if you have any good memories of Daft Punk and their music, if you were into them as much as I am, I know this is a little bit different for a lot of people, but because a lot of people don't listen to this type of music, maybe that follow me on this channel, I listen to a lot of dance, techno, electronic music because, like I said, for me, it stimulates me creatively, and I like doing my artwork while listening to that. I get stuff done quicker, and also it just, like I said, the way the music is done, it just stimulates my creativity. So, I mean, you guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. And once again, if you like this channel, you enjoy my commentaries, you like my art and animation videos, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and make sure you give this video a like, and that way that will help me out very much so with the algorithms here on YouTube. Anyway, guys, Chris Crazyhouse signing out. Peace.